Heather Math 126 fans going to talk about page 1 of the summer 2025 exam. As I always do, I'll talk about the solutions and then I'll talk about where you would have seen it in your studying. Again, the goal of this is not to be negative. The goal is to be reflective. So if you see something that was in the homework and in their studying and you thought you understood it at the time and then you miss it on the test, whether it's for numerical reasons or understanding issues, that's the thing we're searching for right now, is that disconnect. And often by identifying that, then you can adjust how you approach the course the rest of the term and possibly fix some things and then do better on future exams. No guarantee that's going to happen, but you have to look at it this way. Okay. So the first question on the exam was find the area of the triangle given by 3 points. That was something that was in the homework 3 times. I found it. It's this is how I write the test, just so you know. It was 12-4, questions 6, 7, and 8. And then the test prep that I assigned you to prepare you for the exam had the same question. And so in my mind, I give that question. Everyone will immediately know how to start it because there's been 3 homework questions and it was on my most recent exams. In fact, this question's on multiple of my most recent exams. So if you couldn't start this one, that's a very good data point for us because it means you aren't preparing the right way. Because this question was 3 homework questions and on multiple of my recent exams. And if you're preparing for an exam in this course, you do need to work through multiple recent exams. So if you'd have worked through, let's say, the 4 most recent exams, you would have seen this question on the first page of 3 of those tests. Okay, that's the point. Which means going into the test, you would have needed to be immediately ready to say, oh, that's right, this is the length of the cross product. Happens to be the area of the triangle. Now, if you 1/2 the length of the cross product. Now, if you're saying, I don't understand why that is, that was part of the discussion back in 12-4. Okay, so you needed, like I said, keep going in. You would have already done this in a lot of old exams. You would immediately do subtract, subtract, subtract to get 2 vectors that represent 2 of the sides. It doesn't have to be P, Q, and PR. It could be 2 other sides. You had to do their cross product. If you got the cross product wrong, that's a bigger deduction because you can completely check. You can do this times the first, this times the second, this times the third, see if it's 0. Then you get the magnitude. About 60% of the class got this right. I thought it would be closer to 90%. So there is some disconnect where people are missing. I mean, the majority are getting it right. I would say of the 40% that got it wrong, about half of them just made a small arithmetic error. But there's about 20% of the class that had no idea how to start this. That's the group that I'm really trying to talk to here. So if you had no idea how to start this, then there's an issue with preparation. And again, I don't mean that negatively. I know you might have other things. Sometimes people message me angry about these videos. I'm just trying to state sort of the facts of where we're at and the way you can adjust for future exams. I hope you get what I'm saying there. This second question did not go as well for students as I had thought. Only about 40% got this completely right. This actually was so this is an example of something where I looked in the homework and I grabbed something directly. So the questions I looked at in the homework was this one. You had find the unit vectors that are parallel to the tangent line. Then you had another one, find the unit vectors that are parallel to the tangent line. That was back in 12-2, so I know it's been a little while. But then in the practice exam I gave you, you had this question that was, here's 2 lines, find the angle between their intersections. So that also required you find the slope and you give a vector. So if you're still having confusion about why this is a 1, that's a confusion you would have encountered in your studying many times, that you get to pick it to be a 1 if the slope is 3. Now, sometimes people still forget that even after seeing it several times in the homework. That's how it goes sometimes. But the point is, this was an idea we should have had. The moment we saw tangent line here, we should have thought, okay, we need the derivative, we need the slope when x is 2 and y is 6. So you plug in 2, you get a slope of 5. From there on out, the rest of the question was, how do you get a vector with slope 5 that's a unit vector? Okay, so I think people just thought, I think people that missed this question were like, they maybe just studied old exams and didn't look at the homework. That's my guess. Or they've just forgot a piece. So it goes. But we needed a vector that has slope 5. I chose to use 1, 5. You can choose anything where the ratio is 5 and then make it a unit vector. There are 2 because it's this plus or minus. So you'd have a minus distributed through or a plus distributed through. Again, about 40% got it right. So this was one of the places where I was surprised that so many students lost points. Not a huge thing, but that's an example of something on the page that was from homework. Yeah, it wasn't directly from a recent exam. There are recent exams that are very much like this if you just looked at the 4 most recent. Okay, next one. A question about a sphere and how to work with it. Now, this is one I pulled almost directly from the homework, but I added a small adjustment, and the small adjustment was, okay, once you have the equation for the sphere, and that should have been a give me. You had a lot of homework questions like this. The second part was, how are you going to find when it intersects one of these planes? Well, worst case, you could just plug each one in, which is what I did in these solutions. When you plug in x equals 0, this is what you get. When you plug in y equals 0 and find the intersection with the xz plane, this is what you get. But that doesn't make sense because that's a negative. We saw that in one of the homework questions. And same thing here. This doesn't make sense. So there's only one of these planes it intersects with, and it's the yz plane, and the radius is square root of 5. So I think that really should have been a fast page. I wrote all that up in about 5 minutes there. I know, yes, you know, but the point we're trying to make here is, and about over half the class got that right. Here's the similar homework question. Here's the one from your test prep. The other comment I wanted to make is, let's say you're taking the test. I'm just trying to address all the questions I get, and you're completely stuck. You would never want to leave any of these blank. You definitely, I mean, this is one you should know because it was on so many old tests. You should immediately have had a plan. Again, because if you had to look at the 2, even the 1 most recent exam would have prepared you for this. And so you needed to have this ready to go. This has nothing to do with like your background or anything else. This is a preparation thing. So I like to really separate this from other confusions people have. If your mistake was doing the cross product, we emphasize that a lot about how to check your mistakes. This is what I've been trying to get at all term, these bits of advice. So we should have been doing this without even thinking. If that's not how you felt going to the test, then you need to adjust how you approach. This one, okay, you go, I don't quite remember this from the homework, but I see the word tangent. Hopefully you took the derivative. And hopefully you realized that x was 2 because they told you it, and that you had a slope of 5. And the moment you get there, you should go, oh, I need a vector with slope 5. How do I do that? I need the change in y over the change in x to be 5. There are many vectors that do that, but in my opinion, the nicest is 5, 1. And then you had to make it a unit vector. So if you're not doing any of those things, if you were, this is the chance for you to think about what were you thinking as you were doing it, so that we can make sure we get things down the next time. If you didn't get the equation of the sphere, that's a bigger no-no, like there's something bigger going on. We need to know our objects. That usually just means someone's not fully engaged in the course. That's fine if you have other things going on, but this, like I said, this is this is stuff you need to know for future courses. So if you're really not knowing how to start any of these questions, then it's probably time to talk to an advisor. But I hope some of that is helpful. Okay, I don't mean that to be negative. If you miss something, think about these, the places you're in. Again, most people did pretty well on this page. Part B ended up being a little worse than I expected, but we had over 50% got the other 2 questions. And a lot of people that didn't get this right did get some partial credit. All right, hope that helps.